am excited to introduce you to my friend, Ashley Boulais.
Hello.
Ashley loves Jesus, her husband, Brandon, and her 3 boys who are aged 8, 6, and 4, which feels impossible to me. She's an avid reader, an Enneagram 9, and is currently learning hand embroidery and might take up whittling because, COVID. And by the way, she is a pastor's wife. So welcome, Ashley.
Thank you for having me, Jen.
Oh, it is such a pleasure. So I've told a few things about you, and it's hard to believe the boys are that old just because I've known you for so long. I've known you before you were a pastor's wife, but why don't you just tell us a little bit more about yourself, like how long you've been married, where you live, where you're from originally, just some fun stuff like that.
All right. Well, I grew up in a very small town in northwestern Ohio, and I actually met Jen when I went to seminary, which is also where I met Brandon. So we've been married going on 10 years. So 10 years in May. Jen was our wedding planner or coordinator, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and she and Jim kind of mentored us while we were dating. So you've known us for 12 years, probably?
A long time, yeah.
Which is just crazy. So yeah, we have 3 boys. They're in, I have to think, 2nd grade and kindergarten. And then our youngest will be going to school this August. So I'm kind of in a weird transition right now, figuring out what is my life going to look like when all my kids are in school. So that's why I started embroidering. I made this.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Hobbies. Thank you. I just need hobbies to
right.
And ahead, right?
Yeah.
So we are in our 8th year of ministry here at Riverside Evangelical Free Church in Mayville, North Dakota. So I grew up in a small town, and I never thought I'd live in a small town, but here I am. So
it suits you. And small town North Dakota, no less.
I know. I never thought. When we actually interviewed for this job, Brandon, he doesn't agree with this, but I remember him telling me that it was in South Dakota. And I was looking on the map and I was like, it's in North Dakota. That's even worse. We really do love it here. So
that's been great. Good. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk today about something that you know and you've alluded to, which is being a pastor's wife.
Yeah.
So is this a role that you kind of aspired to? You always knew you wanted to be, or is it something you just kind of fell into and had to accept?
Yeah. No, I remember my mom saying when I was a pretty new Christian, she said, you're going to marry a pastor and you're going to move to Africa. And I was like, no way. That's not happening to me. I'm not doing that. That's a stereotypical thing for Christians to do. Right. So I was like, nope, not me. But it was in 2008. I was working at a summer camp and we were in staff devotions. And maybe you don't even know this, Jen, but I was taking notes and the phrase marry a youth pastor popped into my head. And I was like, that's weird, but I didn't have time to process it. So I wrote it down. I actually still have that piece of paper.
That's great.
I know. So it wasn't something that I aspired to, but I actually went to seminary. I know people say you went to seminary to find a husband, right? I didn't. I wanted to learn about Jesus and I wanted to get the education. So I did. I went to seminary. I started out with my master's of divinity and transitioned later to a master's in theological studies. And so I met Brandon my first weekend there, and it happened really fast. We were dating within a month and engaged after 4 months and got married like a year later. So it was really fast, but I just knew. And I knew that he wanted to be a pastor. So that was something that I did sign up for when we agreed to start, dating. I knew that. Yeah, I brought my mom mug. But when we agreed to start dating, I knew that I was signing up to be a pastor's wife, and I was excited about that. I still love it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. That's better than the potential feeling of a bait and switch. I thought you were going to be a lawyer, and here you are doing this instead. So this question, is a very important question because one of the stereotypical requirements to be a pastor's wife is to play the piano. Do you play the piano?
I do not. No. There are a lot of ways in which I am not your stereotypical pastor's wife.
I think the stereotypical pastor's wife just frankly doesn't exist.
You're right. I think she's gone.
But Hugh, you don't have to worry about playing the piano and doing those things.
That is not my forte. No.
Which is a musical term, but that's okay.
That's right. No, I tried to play the guitar once, like youth ministry, play the guitar, right?
Right? Yeah, there's another.
I couldn't sing, and there's too many things going on with your hands. So piano's even worse because you're doing two things with your hands and your feet. So
right. Yes. And different things. Yes. All different. And singing sometimes.
I'm not that coordinated.
So a mom listening might just be wondering, what is so special or different about being a pastor's wife? So what would you tell her, and how would you describe what it is, why it's different?
Yeah, honestly, someone in my congregation asked me this, and I don't think I'm that different than most people. We struggle with raising our kids and what that looks like, and we are walking with people through hard things. And I think all Christians are called to do those things. We're called to walk through the hard, difficult situations. And Brandon just gets to do it and get paid for it. And I get to follow alongside him. And I really get the fun part of ministry. Like, I don't have to do all the planning. I just have to be there for the like sweet moments. Right. So
yes.
Yeah, it's not really that different. The harder parts, I think, come with, Brandon has to maintain confidentiality, and he can't always process with me about things happening in the church for my sake, to protect me, yes. Right? But also for the sake of the people in the congregation as well. And so, I think the other hard thing is raising kids in the spotlight and having expectations on them that might not be on other kids. And I think, Jen, you can probably speak to that too, being a pastor's kid yourself. So
yes, absolutely. So your heart, though, I was going to say, really, to me, the big difference is you're living in the public eye. In some ways, being a pastor's wife is like being a politician's family, because people are watching you. Different motives, different things, but it's in the public space. So your heart, though, I know, is to share, candidly about the joys and the struggles of being a pastor's wife, which, as you said, I'm a pastor's kid. So I really do appreciate that, because I can relate not to the wife part, but to being part of the family and being under scrutiny with expectations that no one told me I was supposed to meet. So
I have to pick your brain about later, by the way.
What's that?
I said I'll have to pick your brain about that later.
That's right. We can talk about that. But I know you want to help people understand the joys and the struggles. So let's talk about some of those things. What was your biggest fear or concern about being a pastor's wife?
Yeah, it actually didn't have anything to do with raising kids, which has ended up being, I think, the hardest part for me. But I was afraid I wouldn't have any friends because... And I asked that, actually. I said to my previous pastor's wife, I don't know. I said, well, are you lonely? And she said, yeah, sometimes, because nobody wants to hear about your pastor leaving his underwear on the floor. And as a wife, you want to be able to vent about those things, and you need a safe space to do that. And that's not always with people in your church, because they look at your pastor differently. And so I was really afraid that moving to North Dakota, where I knew nobody, it's kind of a different culture. I mean, it's very Scandinavian, Norwegian, and that's not something I grew up with. So yeah, I was really worried I wouldn't have any friends.
Yeah. So loneliness. I think you'd also told me that you were worried about your husband actually in that confidentiality space, counseling or working with women one-on-one, and what risks kind of could come from that.
Yes. Well, you hear all these stories, right, about big name pastors having affairs. And I kind of just thought that was going to happen. It was inevitable. And it was nothing to do with Brandon's character. He gave me every reason to trust him.
Right.
But I just kind of thought he's going to be counseling women one-on-one. And I remember sitting in my seminary class where they talked about that. They talked about the ethics of counseling women and, being a male. And I was sitting next to Brandon and I was in tears because I thought, this disqualifies me from ministry. I can't be a pastor's wife and not be comfortable with him, ministering to women one-on-one. Yeah. And a gal stood up in class and she said, maybe I don't want to meet with a pastor's wife. Maybe I just want to meet with a pastor. And I ended up leaving the classroom crying because I just thought, okay, I can't do this. And I think once I worked through a lot of the insecurities behind that and I grew in trusting Brandon even more, it hasn't been an issue, honestly. I have been given freedom to say, no, I don't feel comfortable with you doing that. But I haven't had to use that. I trust him. And I know that the people he works with watch out for him too. They watch out for each other. If he is meeting with a woman or a female youth student, there's always an adult present. So maybe not in the same room, but in the room over, there are windows. So there are safeguards in place. And I don't worry about that anymore. I know that we still have to be cautious and mindful, but it's not something that I feel disqualifies me or, makes me a bad pastor's wife.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. It's so hard sometimes to balance the requirements of ministry with some of those other things that are concerns, especially
insecurity. I mean, it was insecurity on my part. So
yeah. And yes, but balancing insecurity with prudence, being wise is hard.
Right.
So what kind of pressure do you feel from those around you, to be super mom or to be involved with everything, to be there every time the doors are open?
No. So when we were interviewing for this job, I asked the pastor's wife, I said, do you feel pressure from other people to be involved in everything or to play the piano?
Right.
She said, no, she said, I haven't felt that. And I'm not saying that that's true everywhere. I'm sure there are pastors' wives who have felt those pressures, but I haven't. The pressures really come from internally. I remember again interviewing and saying, yeah, I'm going to be, because my husband oversees youth ministry primarily. So I said, I'm going to be there. I'm going to paint my face and hold signs and be at all their activities. And I really genuinely, I want to do that.
Yeah.
But I have 3 kids. I can't. And I only had one when I came here and he was very little. So I just didn't have realistic expectations for myself. And I've had to change those a little bit and give myself grace. But yeah, those expectations really come from myself and not other people. And I'm very grateful. And I don't know if that's just something that's unique to my church or if other pastors' wives can say the same thing.
Right. Well, and I was going to say, you're in a small town. So you have a lot of people not in the church who know you're a pastor's wife. And, I think there's some anonymity in a bigger area.
Right.
So I was going to ask you, how much is there a distinction? Do you feel treated differently out and about in public by non-church people because of your husband's role?
Not anymore that often. I would say when we first moved here, we'd be taking a walk down the sidewalk and be like, hey, you're the new youth pastor at Riverside. And we're like, who are you? How do you know? Go to our church. So yeah, there is some of that. Some of just being known in the community. And there are, some people who you say who you are and they're like, I know who that is. And they kind of tone down their language a little bit or try to act differently. And I kind of wish they wouldn't. I don't have expectations on them to be like me or to have the same morals as we do as Christians. So I do feel like we're a little less anonymous, but that's okay with me. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And there's the newness is worn off. So now it's just, that's who you are, not, the new who you are. Yeah. So let's talk parenting in the public eye. So how do you balance letting your kids be kids with the reality that, that really frankly, they're running around their dad's office. They're at his job, and yet, it's a place you're involved. So how do you balance that letting them make their choices, behave, be themselves, with the expectation that, it is going to reflect in some manner, whether it's conscious or subconscious, on you and Brandon?
Right. Yeah, I don't have a balance. I don't know yet. I know we've been here for going on 8 years, and I still haven't figured it out. Mm-hmm. Every season of life has changed. And it is very different, because you think about when you're at home or you go to a really close friend's house, you make yourself at home. You know where their coffee is, you know where their bathroom is. You don't have to ask. You just go grab a cup and you sit on their couch and just relax. And I think that's kind of the atmosphere that my kids are growing up in at the church. We can go there any day during the week, and they can play in the gym, or, run around or watch movies in the sanctuary. Those things happen. And so they feel really comfortable there. And so they're more likely to make themselves at home. And we really have to balance, which is still not a strong point, but figuring out how to say, yes, you're comfortable here. There are still rules in place. So aside from the gym, we don't allow them to run or jump on furniture, or the kinds of things that we wouldn't let them do on Sundays. There are those boundaries in place. And I think it's hard. The hardest part for me is on Sundays, because I don't know what to let them do and what not to let them do when we're sitting in pews and they're expected to be all prim and proper and quiet, but they're 4 and 6 and 8. And is it appropriate to let them dance in the pews during worship, or is that distracting to people? Or, is it okay if they sit and color while we pray, or do they need to have their heads bowed and eyes closed? And so those kinds of things we've really struggled with, and Brandon and I kind of go back and forth between, okay, is it really a big deal? Or, another example, which maybe a lot of parents deal with, do I make my kids dress up for church?
Right.
Because to an older generation, that's a sign of respect for God. And on the flip side of that, my kids are really proud to wear their sweatpants and mismatched shirt that they chose themselves.
Right.
And if I make them dress up, then I hate church. I don't want to go to church. I hate wearing dress clothes.
Yes.
So you have to is that a battle that I'm willing to fight?
Right. Because yeah.
What we choose does reflect on Brandon. And, I don't know. I want my kids to grow up loving Jesus and loving going to church. So that's, I think, a balance we haven't figured out yet.
I know. And it is hard. You hit the nail on the head when you said every season is different, because it changes. And truth be told, I think those struggles are struggles that every parent faces, whether they're the pastor's family or not. I know people all the time are like, oh, let your kids be kids. We'd rather they're here and disruptive. They say it. Right. But then in reality, we've been in places where people have come and said, I think you might be more comfortable in the foyer. Like, I would have started there if I thought I would be, but thank you. Right. So it is a hard thing to balance, the individual needs of your kids with the group, the whole worship experience at church in the sanctuary.
And again, no one has ever said anything. No one has ever made a single negative comment. And actually, I've heard the same thing that you mentioned is, we love hearing the kids. It's a sign of a healthy church that there are kids here, and we welcome that. But internally, you're always thinking, what are they thinking about my parenting right now?
Right.
So, but we have a very gracious congregation that love us. So
that's a blessing.
It is for sure.
That is a blessing. We talked about this a little bit. You talked about relationships and how they can be tricky, friendships in particular. So how have you fostered safe and authentic friendships? And are you finding them within the church, or are you finding them with people who are outside of the church?
That's both.
Okay.
So I do have friends that are from seminary that I've really been able to connect with, who are in ministry too. And Jen, you're one of those people we can talk about things with. And I prayed fervently for over 2 months straight that I would find friendships here. And when we interviewed, there were no other people our age here that weekend. I don't know where they were, but they kept assuring us, there are people your age. There are people your age. And I'm like, where? I don't see any. But when we got here, we connected with a life group of about 4 or 5 other couples who all got married in the same summer as us. And we just clicked. We were all on the same stage of life. And I'm not a person to shy away from conversations. I'm very candid. I don't get embarrassed easily, for better or for worse. So we were able to connect really easily, and we've stayed connected. We don't have the same life group anymore. Life groups change over time. They grow, they multiply and divide. And so we have different life groups now, but we have a text group. We talk every day, and we walked through deaths of spouses, miscarriage, adoption. And so we've been through it all together. And I do feel like I have safe relationships. And I think fostering that, part of that is just being open and authentic and honest. And that's something that my generation values a lot, and the generations to follow, just being open and real. And so I think that's it. And I do have to be mindful about what I share, with anybody. And so we kind of always edit ourselves, right, to a certain extent with different people. And so I can be open and honest with this group of friends, but maybe I don't share everything that would include Brandon. So
you have some discernment and discretion there with whom you share what. But I love how you have found this way to still use, the tools at your disposal, texting, which everyone's like, that's impersonal, it's this, but what it does is it gives you consistency, and it's that consistency that really develops that depth of relationship. And so I love that even though you're not face-to-face weekly in the same group the way you were, you're still face-to-face and in each other's lives. And that's a gift too, because not everyone finds that pastor's wife otherwise. So that's a really sweet thing to have, that group.
It is, for sure. And 2 of the people in our original life group actually moved away. So one is in Minnesota and one is about an hour away. And texting allows us to all communicate at the same time.
Yes.
Builds our community, I think.
Yes. Absolutely. So you've kind of talked about this a little bit, if you're free to feel like you can be yourself, or do you find yourself being more cautious and guarded around people? And from what you've said, it sounds like you feel a lot of freedom, but is there a guardedness initially, or do you just sort of go in at face value with people?
Probably more so the latter. And again, for better or for worse, kind of what you see is what you get. And I think, I haven't mentioned this before, but I was diagnosed with bipolar in 2017. And that has its own stigma. And we went through a really dark time, and people in the church didn't necessarily know what Brandon was going through with trying to balance ministry and also being there to support me. He was doing everything, Jen. He was cooking all the meals and, and taking care of the kids and trying to do ministry. And I have been really open about that. And I've been open about the struggles of parenting and all of that. And so the things that we have to use discretion about really are things that we're struggling with within the church.
Yeah.
And so, those are things that, and I don't know names because, again, Brandon is very cautious and protective of me and of the people in our congregation. But I do know some situations that are happening. And so I can't talk about those with anybody because I don't know who they're about. So I don't want to do something and then they think that,
she knows everything. Yeah.
Right. And I don't. So,
So what have been some of the blessings? What are the joys? We've talked about some of the potential hard things, but what are the joys of being a pastor's wife, and what are the things you wouldn't trade?
Oh, the list is endless. There are so many things I wouldn't trade. One is I have a walking commentary as a husband. So if I have a Bible question, I'm like, hey, Brandon, and he almost always knows. And if he doesn't know the answer, he has commentaries, like rows and rows and rows of bookshelves of commentaries that he can say, oh, this would be a good book for you to read. And it's also true as a parent, your kids ask you these random, weird theological questions, and you're like, I don't know. And so I can.
But you have a seminary degree, so you're not supposed to be off the hook.
Well, it's true, but I'm not as articulate as Brandon is. And so he can also, he's used to working with students who don't have maybe that concrete level of thinking yet. And so he can say things in a way that kids can understand, that they're abstract concepts, but making it so the kids can understand it. And that is not something I'm great at. So I can be like, hey, Brandon, you answer this question, go ask your dad. So that's one thing that's really nice about having a pastor as a husband. But I think in general with the church, I get to see the beautiful things behind the scenes that other people don't get to see. So when Brandon gets a phone call at 11 p.m. at night with a parent who's struggling with their kid who's run away or dealing with drugs or, whatever, he is there to talk with them. And other people don't know that. Other people don't realize, or maybe they think they do, but I get to see it firsthand. And I get to see when the church gives vouchers for gas or to pay utility bills. And before I was a pastor's wife, I didn't even know that those things were happening. So I didn't get to see all the beautiful blessings. And I think too, just seeing the generosity of our church members caring for one another and caring for us has been a huge blessing. And it's just so beautiful. And I think, I don't know, there's so many things. I don't even know how to list them all. I really don't.
Well, I will speak to Brandon's ability to articulate from two perspectives. One is, he was youth leader to our oldest. Right. And I still hear her say, well, Mr. Brandon said, and Mr. Brandon told me. So he made an impact. But the other way is in with explaining board game rules.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very clear and good and thorough. So a mom listening wants to connect with her pastor's wife or encourage her pastor's wife. What is a simple, easy, non-threatening thing that you would suggest that she does?
Yeah, I love getting cards. I think having a written word is something that you can come back to again and again. Because oftentimes being a pastor is a thankless job. We are, again, very blessed in that our congregation is super encouraging, super supportive. But those cards really mean the most to us. Brandon actually keeps a folder called an encouragement folder. So anytime somebody writes a letter to us or a card or note, he sticks that in the folder. And when he gets stressed or we get anxious about things happening, we can go back to that and we have it on hand to say, these people really do love us. And it's just a good reminder. And also just saying hi on Sundays. How are you doing? Being authentic, asking us. I think that's the best way. Just being honest and caring and making an effort.
Yeah, that's great advice. And someday another conversation, I would love to talk with you more about the bipolar and how that has impacted not just being a pastor's wife, but being a mom and a wife and all of that.
Yeah.
So, but as our time is wrapping up, I have a lighthearted question that I love to ask all my guests, which is, what is your favorite gadget?
Okay, I actually had to ask Jen, what qualifies as a gadget? I'm not a very techie person, but I came up with this answer. So I'm going to just demonstrate it for you here. So this is my headphones that I wear at night. So there's an app called Scribd, which is, it's similar to Audible, but way, way, way better because it's cheaper and unlimited. Okay. So I am an avid reader, but being a mom, I can't always stop and sit down to read a book. But while I'm cooking or cleaning or when I'm falling asleep, I can just put on these headphones while you're exercising and you can listen to your books on the
And
go.
they won't fall out and they won't hurt your ears if you roll over on them.
Right. So when I'm laying down, I can just, and I like this particular set, which I just found on Amazon, that has the Velcro in the back. So you can make it tighter to make the
Nice.
sound better. So
That's
my
really
favorite.
good. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that idea.
You like podcasts?
Yes, that's right. Listen to podcasts all the time now, people. So you actually blog, and I know that you can go for stretches of time between your posts, but I tell you, when you post, I stop and read it because it is really good and it is really worth reading. So how can people connect with you if they would like to talk more about any of these things, but how could they also find you in your blog?
Yes. So you can always email me, and my email address is, maybe Jen, you'll have to include this in the
I'll put it in the show
below,
notes. Yes.
because my last name is impossible. It's Boulais, which is French. So it's not phonetic. Boulais. So both my blog and my email have that in it. So it's my email is boulais@gmail.com. And then my blog is ashleyboulais.com.
Excellent. Well, Ashley, thanks for being here today. Thanks for taking the time to share and for encouraging us.
Thank you, Jen, for having me. It's been a blessing and a blast.